I think we are now live, brother. How you doing?
Well, my friend, how are you, man?
Good, good, good. I have Elder Darrick McGhee here. Many people call him Pastor, Reverend, Brother, all kind of things in the streets. I call him Pastor, so if you or Reverend. So if you hear me say that, you know what I'm speaking about. But this is such a good brother. We are thankful and pleased and grateful to have you here today. Darrick is important to me. Darrick is important to me. Pastor McGhee is important to me because we have been having this discussion for a long time related to Black men's health and what it means, especially in the holistic form, right? Not just physical, spiritual, which definitely we'll be talking a lot about today, but mental, financial, social, all kind of things that make up our experience. And you have an interesting journey, and I want to jump into that today. So before I get into long intros, which I always promise I will not do, Pastor McGhee, Elder McGhee, please tell them who you are.
First of all, man, I really am honored, and it's a great blessing to not only be a part of this conversation, man, but to see Black men's health come into fruition based on the vision you shared with me so many years ago. So I'm grateful to see that. So my name is Darrick McGhee. I simply tell people I'm a boy who was born in Peoria, Illinois, who was raised in Los Angeles, California, now lives in Tallahassee. But I am the happy husband of one, been together since college, and then the father of two awesome children. My namesake, he's 14, and my daughter is 10. And professionally, I work as a lobbyist, but most importantly, I'm a pastor in the Lord's Church. And John, this Saturday makes 10 years of our church, from the planning of our church to now.
Wow.
10 years. I've been in preaching ministry for 21 years, and in lobbying for 20 years. And so God has been gracious. I'm just a simple dude, man, who loves his family and loves people.
You are a simple dude. You're a simply amazing dude. That's what you are. I tell you, what's great about this platform that we're building is we want to talk to regular folks, right? Just regular dudes. There's nothing wrong with the stars among us, right? We have plenty of time to celebrate them, and we will. But there's a lot. I'm not talking about the 1%, 2%, 3%, right? I'm talking about the rest of the 97, 98, 99% that are just trying to figure out how to make it work and deal in excellence and build communities and love on our spouses, right? Love on these beautiful women, these queens, raise these children, create legacy for ourselves and also for our children and our grandchildren, right? We're just trying to figure it all out, how to create balance, right? And that's I'm hopeful that our platform of Black men's health can help with that. So we are talking about fear today. I tell you this, I got all dressed up because I'm talking to Pastor McGhee, and I know he's not only a leader of a flock, but also a lobbyist. I didn't get all my shave on, but I knew in every experience that I've had with Darrick McGhee, I mean, my goodness, he has on a shirt and tie. I can't be coming in here with a T-shirt, and now he flexes on me all in the casual, sitting on the king's throne with 85 books behind him in a polo. All right, all good. I tell the wife I was wrong. This is the first shirt and tie I've worn. What discussions to be had, the discussions that need to be had. But I told my son, Pastor McGhee, and you have been a part of that experience, which I appreciate. Him being in the legislature and things of that nature. I shared with him recently, and this is reflective of that. If you have a choice to dress up or dress down, always dress up, because you can never be wrong. I just look like a clean.
Look good,
dude.
brother. You look good. You look good.
But
this is my coronavirus attire.
There you go. Hey, I'm gonna let you see the waist down. The waist down, that's a whole nother discussion. We're not talking about that. But I promise you, this is the first shirt and tie I pulled out since like March, probably, right? But I shared with our eldest. I said, hey, if you have an opportunity to dress up or dress down, always dress up, because you can always excuse that you are overdressed. But you walking into the room and everybody else has on a tuxedo and you have on a swim attire, you're looking crazy. So that's a good lesson for all of our young people. We should Yeah. But you look good in anything, man. You look good in anything.
Appreciate that.
So Pastor McGhee, let's talk about this, right? We're talking about fear today, man. And you and I have had several discussions about what that means and how that can manifest itself in so many different ways. Let's start with you, man. Let's start with your journey. Before we even get into the pastoral leadership, right? You said, you're coming up on 10 years. To God be the glory. And congratulations. I know how many people you have touched, in the community. So that's a blessing. And how many, how many lives, how many husbands, how many wives, how many children, our eldest, I should say the eldest grandchild. Yeah, right. The eldest grandchild is a member of your flock, right? And we got a chance to celebrate him in a responsible, socially distanced parade where the grandparents could be out there yelling and screaming, and we could be out there yelling and screaming. And Jay Bird is 18, I believe. Letitia said 18 today, which is crazy in itself. But my brother and his family are members of your congregation, and obviously Jay is so important to us because he was the first, right? I mean, he's the first, so having that responsibility of being the first is amazing. So, but I want to talk before we even get into pastoral leadership. Again, I want to hear about that. I want to hear about, again, if you have been in ministerial leadership in some way, shape, or form for 20 years, 2 decades, and you started on your own, 10 years ago, at some point you made a decision, and I'm sure there was fear in that. I want to hear about that. But before we get into that, man, you told me some stories about going way back. I'm talking about going to, pre-college and things of that nature. I want to hear some about that journey and how you got to, college and things of that nature. Can you share with them whatever you desire to share?
Absolutely, man. So as I mentioned before, I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, the home of Richard Pryor, and the home of Carla McGhee, who's my first cousin, who was in the 96 Olympics with the U.S. A basketball team. I'm very proud of my cousin. And so those are the 2 major names in Peoria. My family, my mom, dad, and my brother. I'm the youngest of 2 boys. We moved to Los Angeles in '88. I was getting ready to go into 5th grade, so it was that summer. We left everything that we knew. My mom and my dad are both from Peoria. All of my aunts, uncles, cousins. We moved to Los Angeles. My dad had a job opportunity to work for one of his uncles. And you transition from a small town where everybody knows each other, the McGhee name is prominent, to Los Angeles, where you literally are a small fish in a big pond, never been around gangs, things of that nature. So we moved there to start life anew. And in that came great struggles. Cost of living is high. Gang infestation is real. Trying to raise 2 young Black men in a gang-infested city is more tedious than anybody cares to admit to it. But my mom kept her hands tightly on my brother and I. And I'm talking about the street lights came on and you were outside, ramifications type of upbringing. But my mom also pushed hard. Social economic status was not going to be your crutch. You were going to go to college. It was a word used heavily in our home, college. And so we didn't have a lot of money growing up, man. I watched my parents do the best they could to make ends meet. I watched them, watched my mom talk to the landlord often about leniency to be able to pay the bill the first half on the 15th, keep a roof over her boys' heads. I watched all this, great struggle happen, just trying to live this American dream. And I will tell you, we grew up and we struggled, but I never found comfort, peace, or joy in being broke. It was hard to watch the struggle, and the struggle made me better. Don't get me wrong. I always tell the joke that my mom can make $1 scream. I watched her make money stretch. But I remember when I was entering into high school, my brother was a senior and I was a freshman. And when I got to high school, John, I went to a magnet middle school and a magnet high school. We got bused to San Fernando Valley, which is about 2.5 hours from where we live. And that was important because the local high school I was zoned for was like East Side High on the movie Lean on Me. And I lived in a closely blood neighborhood, and the school was in a Crip neighborhood. So walking there was several blocks, and my mom signed us up to go. So we got bused to school. And that was one of the greatest blessings for me, man, because I got exposed to other cultures, other ways, and people who had already had future dreams and desires. Got to my freshman year at this high school, Cleveland High School. My brother was like Mr. Popular there. So I came on campus with mad love from people because I
There you
was
go.
called as a little brother. He graduates, I become a sophomore, and reality sets in because now all of that motivation, all of that love I was getting goes away. And the reality sets in that you now got to pave your own way. You got to really work this out. And brother, it was hard. It was hard because I was living in two different worlds. I was living in a world where watching my parents try to do the best they could to keep a roof over our head, and then going to school around people who were driving to school in luxury cars and living in flush homes. And so I'm trying and playing basketball with some of these kids. I'm trying to live up to that and portray that at the same point, knowing I'm going home to a different normal. And
Yes.
so my dream, my goal was college. I've always been blessed to be very academically astute. You saw the books that you aforementioned. I love to read. And so my brother and I challenged ourselves with reading. I became student body president our senior year, and that was my gateway to think about college. My dream was to go to USC. I wanted to go to USC. I just couldn't afford to go, man. I mean, it cost of living. The tuition for USC is very high. My dream HBCU was Morehouse because going into my junior year, visited my cousin in Atlanta, and I got a chance to tour Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church and Morehouse and so on and so forth, and just fell in love with it. And Dr. King went to Morehouse, so I wanted to go to Morehouse.
That's
I
right.
didn't get into Morehouse.
Respect.
The
That's right.
first school to accept me was FAMU. Dr. Humphreys was in Los Angeles at a 100 Black Men event, and I was a part of 100 Black Men back then, and he was there, and he was, as you know, a very tall figure, and he was talking about FAMU. And up to that point, what I knew about FAMU was Cole on Martin Lawrence episode had on a FAMU sweatshirt. That's all I knew.
That's right.
And what I knew about Tallahassee was FSU football, because 93, my freshman year, was the year they won the championship with Charlie Ward leading the way. And so my lifestyle growing up was challenging. We struggled greatly. And so I wanted to get away from Los Angeles. And to me, Tallahassee was the furthest away from Los Angeles. And so when I got accepted, I took it. And brother, when I tell you, I thought I was prepared for life outside the home, and I wasn't. It's one thing to leave your parents' home and go to the neighboring college. Another thing to leave your parents' home and go 5.5 hours across the country. And that was the reality. So when I came
by plane,
exactly.
2,200 miles by car. I know
exactly. So John, when I landed in Tallahassee in 1996, it was in August. We graduated June 20th of 96. I was in Tallahassee the first week of August. Brother, this is the true story. I came with acceptance letter from FAMU, $200 in cash, and 5 suitcases. That's what I had. I had watched the movie Higher Learning and just assumed that I was going to walk into this flushed out dorm. And when I walked into Pattyfoot, 311A Pattyfoot was my dorm room.
Pattyfoot, man. Pattyfoot.
I walked in.
I've been there.
To bunk beds. My roommate hadn't come yet. There was no linen in the room. There was no welcoming package. And so I spent my first 3 days in Tallahassee balled up on a bunk bed cot with a sheet. Thankfully, it was good weather outside, but that's when reality set in. I called home multiple times. Again, I didn't come from money, so I couldn't call and say, "Can you send me money?" I had to make do with the $200. Right. But man, when I tell you, talk about fear, I had never been away from home before. I'm a mama's boy, and so I never even been away from my mom for more than a weekend up to this point. And it was a great challenge. To add to that, I am the first on my dad's side of the family, male or female, to go to college. I'm the second male and the third, at the time, a third of my mom's side to go to college. And so there wasn't really a blueprint. There wasn't really a standard by which I could follow. And so I realized, man, you gotta make do. And I remember calling home 5 times in the first hour and a half, just completely homesick. And my dad gave me the greatest advice. He said, "Why don't you try to meet somebody?" And I remember sitting on the steps of the dorm, of my dorm, and I met a guy named Byron Donalds. And Byron actually now is a House member, actually running for U.S. Congress. Byron had come down on a Greyhound from Brooklyn, New York. We were sitting there sharing our sob stories, and we became really good friends. But I share that with you, man, because I remember sitting there on those steps at Pattyfoot, thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? I didn't know anybody. No one from Los Angeles had come to Tallahassee to go to college. So I didn't even have any friends, things of that nature. Now, the blessing of leaving from home is you can create your own narrative. That's the blessing. The other side of that, though, is that fear was real, because not only was it the weight of succeeding in the classroom, it was a realization of, if you flunk out, you don't have money to get home. So what are you going to do? And man, I dealt with depression. Now, I haven't talked about this openly to a lot of people. I dealt with depression because I felt like I wasn't built for college. I knew I had the grades. I knew I'd come in with a high GPA and great extracurricular activities, all that type of stuff. But when you look at the history of my family, you don't see many people who have done this. You don't feel like you qualify to be doing this. And so I dealt with depression heavily. And then I didn't know it was depression. I've learned later it was depression. I dealt with it in a major way, man, because I felt like the pressure of family was upon me. And I came to realize, brother, it wasn't everything. I put it on myself, but I felt like
that's right.
If you fail, they're going to laugh in your face. And so, John, here is the interesting thing. I spent 4 years of college where I bust my tail, finished with a dual degree in political science and religion. My parents and my brother came for the graduation December 15th, 2000. Gave my mom the packet where it had supposed to have the degree in there. And the next morning I woke up, it was a Saturday morning, I woke up to a thought of depression. And here is why. Because I spent the entire 4 years of my college trying to prove the invisible people wrong. So when I finally got the degree, woke up the next morning and said, okay, now what becomes your motivation? Because you spent 4 years motivated to prove people wrong. Now you've done that now. Right. And brother, the greatest level of fear is when I came to the realization that I don't even know what I'm gonna do with my life. Like I have this degree, I'm excited about it to an extent, but what's going on here? And again, there wasn't a blueprint. There wasn't a blueprint that I could actually pull from or draw from that told me stick to this plan this way. Now, I'm a mama's boy, but I'm also a granddaddy's boy. My grandparents both died while I was in college. My grandmother died my freshman year. My granddaddy died my junior year. So, not only did I deal with depression of feeling inadequate at being in college, I also came to my Damascus Road experience where I realized I didn't know God like I thought I knew God. I grew up in church, but my knowledge of God was through the lens of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Now grandma's dead, and I come to the realization that, Lord, I don't know you. I remember being in my dorm room my freshman year when I got word that my grandmother died. I remember just buckling at my knees because everything I knew about God died with her. I remember being on my knees crying and saying, Lord, I don't know you. Like I don't know anything about you. Everything I knew about you came through her lens. And so now you're dealing with the depression of feeling inadequate. Then you deal with the depression of coming to knowledge you don't know who this God is. And then the fear set in of you're not gonna make it. You're just not gonna make it. You're better off going home. And then John, I'll tell you, when that thought came in, I remember missing class for 2 straight days because when that thought came in, it was a realization of not only do I feel inadequate, not only do I not know who God is, I can't even go home. I can't afford to go home. And so what do I do? What do I do? And I remember being in line at Foot Hillier to find out what my financial aid status was. I remember being in line, got to the front of the line after a long day in line and asked me for my social security number. And I gave it to him. The lady said, sir, I'm sorry, this is not your day. This is not your alphabet. They come back tomorrow. And I broke down crying in Foot Hillier. And a lady named Miss Inge, who actually just passed away recently, Miss Inge. Happened to walk by.
From the neighborhood, man. That's Inge's mother.
Yeah, she walked by at the right time, brother. I didn't care about being seen. I was just broken. She walked by and she picked me up and said, young man, follow me. And I followed her. I remember sitting in a chair next to her desk. She gave me some tissue and said, let's first get you to stop crying. I calmed down. She said, tell me what's going on. I walked her through everything through the lens of tears. I said, ma'am, I can't go home. I just cannot go home. I said, but I'm afraid to be here, but I can't go home. I remember she grabbed me, put both her hands on my cheeks and said, young black man, you are here to succeed and you're going to succeed. And I'm going to help you get started. And she wrote down, John, on a sheet of paper, something. She said, now go down to the housing building and give this to, and she gave me a person's name. But I had gotten the eviction letter from my dorm. I got called in front of the class because I hadn't paid my tuition. I went to this man and gave him the note and he went to the computer. Next thing you know, man, things started working themselves out. And to this day, I never read the note. That was her instruction. What I know is at a broken place on the floor of Foot Hillier, God has sent Miss Inge at the right time, coming back from her lunch break. And she pulled me in there, man. And brother, when I tell you, and I've dealt with fear a lot since then, but that moment, it's another thing. It's one thing to be confident but still battle fear. The other thing when you feel inadequate and you're battling fear, because I didn't know how to even encourage myself that we gonna get through this. Because here's the reality: I could go back home to LA with my neighborhood friends, or either living at home, selling drugs, in a gang, or in jail. So there are many options. But I know I need to do this because one of the greatest way I can reward my parents for the sacrifice is by putting in the work. And here is the thing that I battled with more than anything else on top of all that was, when you grow up in the Black community, this is saying that whatever goes on in my house stays in my house. So I never really learned how to verbalize how I was feeling about things. I suppressed everything. I suppressed everything regularly. And so my mom and I would talk on Sunday night. She asked me, did you go to church? Yes, ma'am. What do you preach about? Give her what we talked about. How are you doing? And I trained myself on how to give her a great response so that she didn't have to worry about it.
Boom, boom,
she didn't know before I called her, and after we hung up, I was crying before I called and broke down crying after I hung up because I was miserable. I just wanted to go home. I knew I couldn't tell her that, but I knew she'd give me her last to get me there. And brother, what happened was, man, God began to put people in my path who really became a blessing. I met 3 of the greatest guys my freshman year: Jarvis, Will, and Nate, who became my dearest friends. And then we add Leroy in it. So 4 of my greatest friends. And man, we just became very close. We share the same story. And as I'm succeeding academically at FAMU and seeing great things, then I get hit with the reality of I can't afford to live. So I'm working a full-time job and in school full-time. And other people are struggling under this, John. For me, I learned in that situation that I did better and I do better under pressure. And so I worked junior and senior year, a full-time job at Office Depot, and worked in with the school full-time, taking between 15 and 19 credit hours a semester. And brother, my GPA
Holy crap, 15 to 19.
Yeah, my last semester, I did 19 credit hours. I was averaging 15. And man, when I tell you though, it became, the more people said I couldn't do it, it became my motivation. It became my motivation.
That fuel. That fuel. Yep.
It became a fuel, man. But when I graduated, everything that I had suppressed, it seemed like that Saturday morning after graduation came as a huge flood. And I remember walking in my neighborhood I was living at the time, and walking and crying and trying to figure out what does next look like. You have this degree with no job. I went to every career expo, went to every job interview. I got a degree, no job. What does next look like? And being very transparent, man, I grew up battling suicidal thoughts because of some domestic things growing up. And so that day was probably my lowest day in my life because I have a degree and I've achieved this great milestone, and next doesn't look promising. And so for me, my mom, my dad, and my brother are in town staying with me. I'm walking by myself, and I get a call that my Aunt Mary was suffering and was near a point of, she was getting gravely ill with her cancer. And brother, my first thought was, man, life is not worth living. And so I began to flush through these thoughts, because for me, dying was better than fighting through the fear of living.
And easier.
Yeah, and easier. And much easier. It was much easier to just say, you know what, man, I know it's gonna break my parents' heart, my brother's heart, because we're very close, man, but I was so broken. And because I had trained myself never to show weakness and never to show my emotions, no one knew the depth of my pain, the depth of my fear. And so while my parents, my brother in an apartment complex, excited about my achievement, I'm on a morning walk broken and trying to figure out, if I don't kill myself, how do I go back into this apartment and keep playing this role? And brother, it was the mask, man. It was the mask. It was the mask. And I did that for a good period of time, wearing this mask. And here's the sad thing about wearing a mask, is you wear it for so long, you begin to convince yourself that you are the mask and not the person behind the mask. And I started living this portrayal, wearing this mask all the time, because we'd always be on 10. I couldn't be on 5 or be on 1. I had to be on 10. And so I am performing in front of a crowd every day, in a sense, trying to live up to this, and going home literally broken, shutting myself into my apartment. Lights are off sometimes. I just when my wife and I are dating. She's noticing some things, but I'm not really verbalizing what's going on. Real struggles. And I would never confess then that I was afraid, I was battling fear, because the way I was raised with a strong maternal grandfather and strong uncles is don't you cry, man up. And so displaying that was not easy. And so I would find myself sometimes by myself in the apartment with the lights off and just broken, because I felt it. I just felt like, I'm going to buckle under all of this. And man, it continued to go for a while, until one day I just had literally, I remember at this point, I'm early in my ministry, and this story John about to tell is not known by a lot of people. My church knows it, but I had just gotten licensed as a minister. This was the late 99, early 2000. No, this would have been by 2001, because I had already graduated. I remember being in the pulpit at the church I was at, Tabernacle. Pastor Walker's up preaching, and I become overwhelmed with emotions. I remember walking out of the pulpit, walking to my car, and I had one of point A to point B cars. But in my mind, I should carry a butcher knife under my driver's seat, and not for protection. It's because I was so broken that if I ever got the guts to kill myself, I had the utensil available. And that morning I became overwhelmed in tears. I remember walking to my car, and a dear brother of mine at the church, Gerald McGhee, ran behind me. And by the time he got out of the church, I was already in my car pulling off. And I made up my mind that morning, in that moment, I'm going to Lake Ella and I'm going to take my life. Last thing I remember was being at the light at Magnolia in South Monroe Street, right at the Big Ben Cares building. And I remember being overwhelmed in tears. And I had made up my mind, I'm done. And I don't know if I blacked out, John. I don't know what happened. But when I came to, I was back in Tabernacle's parking lot. Now, here's what I believe, but I can't give you assurances. I believe I left the parking lot of Tabernacle. But I can't assure you that, because what I do know is that I ended up back at Tabernacle. And I remember hearing the voice of the Lord tell me, you will not die. You shall not die. You shall live. And that's when I began to really have to face these fears. And the hardest thing is a person who lives their life on 10 to perform in front of an audience, now having to face that you're really on a 1. And so I was worried about the embarrassment, about the shame and all of that. But I had to face where I was. And I had to get to that place. I was on a 1. And I had to deal with everything I've been dealing with, my childhood, my financial struggles, all these things, to deal with all these things, man. The lies that I had been living, the mask that I had been wearing, deal with all these things. And brother, when I tell you, one of the worst feelings in the world is to look at yourself in the mirror of your car and not recognize who's looking back at you. Because I was performing to the people, but I had lost my identity in all this. And it was a breaking moment. And I'll pause there, give you a chance to ask other things, man. But who I am today is nothing short of the grace of God. And I'm not trying to be over spiritual, but I'm a woman who believes in the power of the Lord. And that's what it is, man. But fear is a real emotion. It's toxic, and it can create paralysis, where it literally pauses you in place. And people around you are living their lives. They're moving. They're in motion. They may never realize that you are stuck in a place. You may be physically in 2020, but you are mentally and emotionally in another year in your past, because you are stuck at a moment of fear and you never move forward.
I don't want to interrupt. I want you to keep going, and I hope you start another sharing with us, because that's so valuable and there's so much there. We're gonna go ahead and call this part 1 right now, because we got more to talk about. I mean, we could just go back and talk. We don't even have to talk no more about this. We could go back and talk about that, but we are going to move forward, and we're going to get up on a part 2 at some point. I want to touch on a couple of those things and ask you, right? And that's just obviously so disheartening, right? I use that term easy, right? In the sense of easy, not in the sense of like, I want to make sure people understand. I don't mean that somebody that's choosing to move forward and take their life or taking an easy way out, being weak. That's not what I mean. What I mean by that is in facing how much is up against you, right? And things that are in front of you that are insurmountable, this path is so much easier than that, right? And trust me, brother, we're not here to talk about me today. We're going to talk about you, but there are definitely some things I have to get into. I've run a business since undergrad. Your point of being on 10 or needing to be on 10 so much for everybody else. Our discussion about, wearing the mask that grins and lies, it hides our cheeks and shades our eyes, right? This is reality, right? These things that, speaking to your mom when we are doing so much to protect them, right? How much they've given for us. We don't want to leave them on the phone thinking we're concerned. It almost becomes automatic, right? How you doing? How you doing, John? How you doing, honey? How you doing, Stink? Great. Good. We're good. It's just automatic, right? Because we are protecting them from being concerned and worried about us. It's so much there, man. I will pause to ask you this though, and this again just so disheartening. How do we, and I think I talked to Reverend Matt about this recently. He has so much to say. And also, let me pause. I did not dress up with him because he's a pastor also. But he's not a pastor and a lobbyist and leading the church right now. So that's why I dressed up for you. Shout out to Reverend Matt. How do we, right? I mean, I said the same thing to him, Pastor McGhee. I know who you are to me. I know who you are to my brother and his family. I know who you are to several men, right? In our small group that we've met with, I know who you are to those men today. Yesterday, 10 years ago, right? Folks in the legislature, in the governor's office, right? Folks back home, I'm sure. People that are watching this right now. I know who you are. We know who you are. We know how much you mean to us. How do we, for somebody that was right there where Darrick McGhee was and believing they were less than anything, believing they were not on 10, not on 1, 0 or negative, what can we say to those young brothers, those older brothers right now to let them know that they are valued, they are worth it, right? If they ask a question, Darrick, if you stopped and rolled down your window, if you paused and looked back to the brother that was running behind you to check on you, they would tell you in the moment. They would just let it out how much you're loved, how much you're valued. So what can we do to arm brothers to make sure they understand? Even if they're not feeling it, which is the important part, you got to feel it yourself. Even if they're not feeling it, what's the sounding board? What's the tools and the mechanisms they can use in the moment to just give them a little bit to move forward?
The first thing I would say to a brother before I give him that advice, the first thing I would say to a brother in that moment is, man, I see you. Because here is what people don't realize, especially non-males don't realize, is the weight of the world rest upon our shoulders. We're always trying to be. We are by creation made to be workers and worshipers. If you think back to Adam was a worker and he was a worshiper, right? He was tasked with naming the animals that the Lord created him, and also he worshiped the Lord at a set time. He was a worker and a worshiper. And so whenever a man is prevented from doing both of them, that man begins to deal with inadequacy and low self-esteem, so on and so forth. And sometimes we can curl up in a large crowd and look invisible. So telling that brother, man, I see you, is important because it then allows him to be able to feel acknowledged. The advice that I will give any brother who feels the way I felt, and I would say this to you, man, I've learned over the year that God takes your miseries and uses them for ministry. The things that I'm sharing with you
Amen.
have been some of the greatest blessings for the church that I pastor, for the young professionals that I mentor. It's been a great blessing. I'm very transparent about these things, and all of these stories and scenarios I've been through have been a blessing to be able to share with them, because sometimes people only meet you in one context, whether it's a lobbyist, that's right, in your suits in the Capitol. They never understand the person behind the suit. And so when you start telling them how you got to where you are, and they begin to realize that, I mean, you haven't always been where you are now. There was a journey, and I'm happy to share that journey. But I would tell the brother who feel like that they're on one, the first advice that I would give them is acknowledge that reality. What my fight was, John, is I wouldn't acknowledge it, because for me, acknowledging it was a sign of weakness. It was a sign that I wasn't a man. So I dare not tell anyone that I'm broken. I dare not tell anyone that I'm battling with fear and suicidal thoughts. I will not. I will keep portraying it, and I will convince myself that I'm so good at portraying this role, everybody around me is buying tickets to see the movie. And so I would do that. So the first thing I would tell them is, man, you have to acknowledge the fact that, brother, I'm broken, I'm depleted, I'm just in a dire situation. We have to do that, because there is no way you can actually move to next until you first confront where you are now. And that's not easy, because as a Black man, and as Black men, I'm talking to Black men first, as Black men, most of us were not raised, given allowance to be open and honest about how we really feel. With anything, we were beaten, whether we verbally or physically, we were beaten into submission of never showing emotions. And so now you have emotionless fathers raising sons and daughters to an extent, but sons who never seen a dad cry. And so it was beaten into us. And so me acknowledging that I'm on one is not easy, to the point where when I realized I was depleted, that's what I believe led me to run to my car to go try to commit suicide, was coming to that realization, coming to that acknowledgement. And so the first thing I would tell a brother is man, you got to acknowledge where you are. You have to be honest with yourself that, man, this is where I am. Because what was happening to me, John, is my wife and I, by the point of me really starting to flush through and start to get out, we were at the point of engagement in the early part of our marriage. And I started realizing, man, that I was coming home to a wife who was happy to see me, I'm happy to see her, but I'm so depleted, I don't even know how to really be intimate to my wife, and not from a sexual standpoint, just by way of just spending time with her.
Yeah. That's right.
My wife, man, God bless me so with an awesome woman of God, awesome woman in general. My wife has loved me, flaws and all, right? She has loved me and been with me, man, when I didn't have anything, and what we have now, God bless us together. But I had to be honest with myself of, here's where I am. When from the acknowledgement of where I am now, that I'm in a depleted state, I'm here. The next thing, which I think is even more of a challenge than acknowledging, is the willingness and the acceptance of help, of actually asking for help. Now, I'll be very transparent with you and the listeners, man, is I'm actually now in counseling. I'm in counseling for, and it's important to say this, because I used to be the anti-counsel guy. Ain't no way in the world I'm going to no counselor. Jesus is my counselor. I read the Bible. I pray. I'm good to go. Then I started going to a counseling session and realized, oh wow, this is very therapeutic. This is very helpful, because one thing, you could work on your physical and your mental can be all messed up. And
absolutely.
So I'm sharing that with people because I had to grow into the acknowledging and acceptance of, man, I need help. I've been used to being the one people call when they needed help. So I'm used to being the encourager. I'm used to being the cheerleader for everybody else. My wife asked me a question.
You're building,
one time, John.
You're the builder.
I'm the builder. I'm the edifier. My wife asked me a question one time. She said, Darrick, who encourages their encourager? And that's been a rocky question for me, because I'm so used to being the encourager, to be the builder, that what happens when the construction worker,
that's right,
loses the utensils to be able to construct anything, and now he needs help building, and there's no one around him. And so for me, my challenge was the reason why I would never ask for help is because I didn't want to ever empower someone to hurt me. So by me saying, hey, John, I need help, John now has the power to say, I'm not helping you. And I would never give you that power. So I would rather wallow in my depression, in my depletion, in my dire state, than to ever give you the power
to give you that. To give you that.
You wouldn't have it on me. You also would not have the power to be able to tell somebody else, if it wasn't for me, Darrick would still be in depression. So based on those two, based on not giving that power away, I became what other brothers are right now, which is I was the guy who said, I don't need nobody help. I don't need nobody help. And I would say to brothers, number one, you got to acknowledge where you are, the state that you are in, and then number two, be open to help. Now receiving help is challenging because I adhere to confidentiality, so I'm very careful about who I actually receive help from. But I also will tell you that I've been blessed by real help, people who genuinely want to see the best for you. I tell my mentees this. I always tell them this, John. I say, listen, I don't want anything from you, but I want everything for you. So you don't have to acknowledge me when you get an award. I'm a cheer for you regardless. I want to see you succeed. And so I've been blessed to have people in my life who want that for me. And that's hard because when you've been burned by people throughout life, you look at everybody suspiciously. So when that one person comes into your life and they genuinely care for your well-being, you side-eye them saying, okay, at some point, this person is going to do me wrong. And so the first thing I say is acknowledge the state you're in. Number two, be open to and acknowledge that you need help. And then number three, and most important number three as well is make a commitment to yourself by looking at yourself in the mirror and commit to yourself that you're going to discontinue the lies. Because we can lie to ourselves and tell ourselves, I'm good, I got this, I'm straight, I don't need nobody help. And we can convince ourselves. Bishop T.D. Jakes said this years ago. He said, the greatest enemy is the enemy in me. And so I can start lying to myself and tell myself, man, I got this, I don't need nobody help. If you hit all them, man, everybody's against me. And you start dealing with that mindset. And so now with that mindset, John, I'm coming home to a beautiful, supportive wife, and I'm always angry. Beautiful, supportive wife, I'm always on edge. Beautiful, supportive wife, and I'm always combative. She's done nothing to me, right? She's been nothing but a great supporter, but she's trying to figure out, why are you always angry? What's going on that's making you so angry? And I'm not going to tell her because I don't want to verbalize. By verbalizing it, I'm actually acknowledging that it may be petty or I'm weak. So I'm not going to acknowledge that because to me, macho-ness equates to manhood. But there's a verse in the Bible, 2 Corinthians 12, where Paul is talking about, being pricked with a thorn in the side, and he said he went to God 3 times. And the Lord said to him, my grace is sufficient for you. He said, and my strength is made perfect in your weakness. It's what I would say to men. I had to say to myself through a mentor of mine at the time, is that we have this thing all wrong. We were taught that manhood equates to strength, that every man ought to be strong in order to be a man. But what that verse is saying is that actually you see God's strength at the greatest when you acknowledge you're weak.
That's right. Absolutely.
So that's the challenge of number 2. When I say discontinue to lie, is acknowledging the fact that, you know what, not only am I weak, it's okay for me to be weak because I can now receive the help that I need to get back to the place I need to be in. For those of us who are husbands, our wives that God has ordained, they have an assignment in our lives, right? A wife can uphold you till you get back on your foot if you let her out. I believe that every man ought to have at least one mentor, somebody that you actually can go to who holds you accountable, who calls you out when you're wrong, somebody that you've empowered to check you and check on you. I believe that. But it's hard when you always want to be the macho. It's even harder when you have become everybody's sounding board and nobody has an ear to you.
Who encourages the encourager?
Yeah, my wife actually, we were on I-10 headed back from a trip, and she said, Darrick, I want to ask you something. I said, okay. She said, who encourages the encourager? And brother, I usually drive with one hand on the wheel. I have both hands on the wheel. And thankfully I did, because that question today, and that was probably 5 years ago, that question still rings in my ear every day. Who encourages the encourager? But I get excited about seeing people get blessed and get promotions. I get excited about helping people reach their next level, whether it be spiritual or professionally. I get excited about it. But sometimes what I realize too, I get so invested in somebody else's life that I'll go home and I've talked all day long. I'll get home physically there and I'm saying nothing to my wife or my kids. So now they're paying the price for their dad investing in everybody else but home. This coronavirus is slowing down.
Exhausted.
It's slowing down, John, has been one of my greatest blessings because it allowed me to assess and reassess.
Ours too, brother.
You know what I'm saying?
Ours too. You hear me?
Assess and reassess.
And I tell you, hey, if I could chase Letitia all day long, you hear me? Hey, forget all this consulting and anything else I needed to do for revenue. If I could chase Letitia all day long, I would. You spoke a couple things there, right? So much there. Again, one of the things, I have been blessed with a partner in life, this beautiful woman of mine that God has definitely blessed me with, definitely more than I have ever deserved, right? I'm still learning how to serve her. I'm still learning how to cover her and protect her and do whatever I can to just be thankful for this blessing. One of the things I love about her is the fact that we can celebrate other people blessing and that be it, to your point, right? If we see you all get blessed, we're happy about that, period. Nothing, we don't need anything from that. If we can help you in that, if we can bless somebody, all good. We don't need anything, right? And having a partner that is on that level and understands that is such a blessing, right? We're just doing this. We're just helping. We're just investing just because we can. To God be the glory. We're going to bless somebody. We can be a blessing. We can enjoy their blessing and need nothing from it. And that be such a blessing. Another thing you referenced, and I know we're not talking about necessarily husband, wives, that's a whole nother discussion that we can get back to. But when you reference, and you were more so talking about your boys, your men, other people, but definitely the women in our life, specifically our wives, a lot of men get it wrong because, if you're doing it right, you are so open and vulnerable that it is scary, yep. Right? I mean, if you can sync up so well with her and the Lord, right? If you can sync up so well, that means nothing's hidden. So she knows everything, right? And I say to some dudes sometimes, husbands, especially new husbands that got it all figured out and they don't know nothing, is that the things that somebody says to you that can easily roll off your shoulder because you could care less, right? Your wife can say so. She don't have to say it. She don't have to verbalize it. Yes, she can mumble something, right? She can subtly, tune her face or not respond or whatever it is. And man, that thing can cut you. I'm talking about right? I mean, it can just slice you in half. Yes, sir. Because they know the levers, right? Yes. They're so connected. They know the levers, right? But the blessing in that also is they can help heal, right? They can help encourage, they can help rejuvenate, right? I mean, it's such a blessing to have that, but it's definitely a challenge if you can't give it all. And to your point, the last thing you just said, whether that be your wife, whether that be friends, whether that be your boys, whether that be people in your life, if you have experienced things where people have use that gift against you, it is challenging, yes, right? Because you're waiting for them to show up, right? You're waiting for them. Letitia and I have a thing. We say, sometimes we've met somebody before. They just had a different face and a different name, right? So when they show themselves, you're like, oh, I know you. Yep. I know you, right? Yep. Yeah, like you look different, right? You're 10 years later, you're 15 years later, you got a different name, a different face, you walk different, but I know you. I know exactly who you are, right? So that's a challenge also. And for me, man, I have to give people the grace and the mercy that I'm given and just give them an opportunity. Don't get me wrong. When you start showing me who you are, I'll plant that seed. And it's right here. There you go. Now, if I need to pull that back out later, I will, but I'll give you the grace. One of my ministerial leaders has said, a great gentleman, he has said that oftentimes we judge people by their action, but we want to be judged by our intention, right? Like, oh, I didn't intend to offend you, Darrick. I didn't intend to be late. I didn't intend to disrespect you, right? But I want to judge you by your actions. Like, no, you said this. Yeah. You showed up this. You said this to her. You right. I'm judging you by what you're doing, but I want to be judged by what I intended, by my intentions. So, yeah, man. Okay. And we gotta pause this. I see some folks have. Well, actually, this is a statement because we hadn't even got into some stuff I wanted to talk about. So we definitely have to come back. So this is somebody, they said, recognizing Darrick is a man of God outside of the spiritual connection you have with Christ. What advice can you give to confront fear and get past the feelings of doubt?
Man, I kept looking at that when it first got posted. So I'm gonna give the advice from my lens. I had to start looking at fear through the lens of an acronym, Jon. And so I made fear an acronym. And I must be very honest. I didn't create this acronym. I heard it somewhere else. Can't remember where I heard it from, but it became a great blessing to me. So fear became an acronym, and it basically means false evidence appearing real. And so I started realizing that not only fear is a real emotion. There are people right now today that are in bondage to the fear of what's going on with the coronavirus. I acknowledge the fact that this virus is real and it's impacting lives, but as far as just like they're overwhelmed with the fear. Now, and so one of the things that I had to start doing is I had to start really evaluating the things that I was doing, people and the people I had around me. Because sometimes when you're trying to really flush your system out, sometimes you don't realize that the reason why you're overwhelmed and you're weighed down is because it's not the flushing out, which is the pouring in. There are people and there are things that we're doing that are keeping us held down because they have actually made it their occupation to stay last on to you. People who are content with mediocrity never want to see you desire to do more because they're content with mediocrity.
That's right.
And so from a point of facing fear, it's the realization of, number one, you're not the only person that deals with fear. You're not the only person that deals with fear. You're not the only person who has, who is, or who will deal with fear. And so in that regard, I had to give myself some leniency of stop being so hard on myself and say, Darrick, listen, what other than Christ, who else was perfect? No one. Other than Christ, who was able to do what he did? No one. So stop trying to have this savior complex. Come to the realization, man, that you are no different than anybody else. And so that the first thing really is that. Second thing is I had to really start facing things from my upbringing. And I'm not saying it different directly from a parental standpoint, but sometimes it's through observation, right? You grow up and you see things and you start looking. I had cousins who were way more skilled at things that I was skilled in. You start feeling like you're inferior. You start hearing cousins get open compliments from loved ones that you've never received before. You have somebody around you, family or friends, who are telling you you're inadequate, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're never going to be anything. Those things begin to take root in your life. And so when you finally start feeling like you're going to try to go after something, those things come up. What we haven't talked about, John, at some point we will, is, I mentioned that our church will be 10 years old this Saturday. That also marks my 10-year pastoral anniversary, right? I did 13 years in assistant ministry before I started pastoring. But brother, the Lord gave me a vision in 2006 to start a church, to plant a church from the ground up. Talk about level of fear. Is God is entrusting me in this area professionally. Most of the jobs I had when I was in public sector, I was the only Black in the room, male or female. I was the youngest Black, and the only Black in the room. So you talk about levels of fear. And so then you talk about doubts, self-doubts, and do I deserve to be here? I'm inadequate. I'll go to meetings sometimes and wouldn't say anything because, I felt like I didn't qualify. I had some coworkers over the time who felt like my FAMU degree was not adequate to their whatever degree it was. All these things. And what they didn't know was their words was not what kept me silent. What kept me silent was an internal struggle with me believing I deserve to be at the table. I had become so used to sitting either against the wall or became so comfortable with eating crumbs off the floor that when now I got positioned to be at the table in front of a full meal, I didn't even know how to hold my utensils right because I wasn't used to be at the table. I was used to being an invited guest against the wall or waiting on crumbs to fall. I pick them up and I eat them. That now I've been thrust to the table, not only thrust at the table, and now being asked for my opinion. My grandfather used to tell us, listen, don't be known for over speaking. But you say, but when you do speak, say something worth listening to. So I wouldn't over speak in meetings, but when I finally would say something, my goal was to wow the room. And so I would take everybody's
make those words matter. Make those words matter.
Exactly. Make them matter. Because my point is maybe the only chance I get to talk. Now, here was a challenge with that, John, is I'm hearing my grandfather's sound advice in my ear, but I'm also dealing with my own doubts, my self-doubts, because there's no one here looking like me, right? Let me go a little further and tell you this. When I was working for Governor Rick Scott, who I actually enjoyed working for, I was blessed to be his director of legislative affairs. I ran all of his government policy to an extent, all of his legislative affairs, lobbying for the governor. I did my own research, and I was the first Black to occupy that role for any governor in Florida's history. Now, why do I bring it up? Because while I celebrate that, it also became a greater way to realizing, brother, if you mishandle this moment, you have ruined for everybody else. And so those self-doubts are kicking in of, man, I can't do this. I don't come from this. I don't come from money. I don't come from big name, things of that nature, all those things. And I will tell anyone who is listening to this now or later, here's what I will tell them. I will tell them that the reason why I believe God blesses us with what he blesses us with, because he knows that he can trust us with it. I was every day reminded that I don't deserve to be at this table, that I'm struggling to even believe I qualify to be here. I have so many doubts about my abilities. I really shouldn't be in this room. And the more I felt that way, the more my role at the table enlarged, because I was leaning heavily upon a source that I knew is not for you. I can't do this. So the question that was raised, I had to start doing some tough things, man. I had to start really looking at people in my life, looking at people and start asking myself, are these really friends, or are we just friendly with each other? And that's hard, because sometimes we feel like numbers equate to security. So the more people you have around you, the more security you feel. Right. It's actually false. It's actually false. That's elementary. And when you're in elementary school, you have a lot of friends. When you come out of college, man, if you have 2 good friends come out of college, you're doing good in life. So I had to deal with that. And I had to stop befriending people who would allow me to wallow in my excuses. So I started being transparent about things. I started openly talking about things I went through in my childhood, things I went through with suicidal thoughts, things I went through with depression. Started talking about things openly for 2 reasons. Number one was because it was therapeutic for me to talk about it openly. But number two, just in politics, is that if I tell my own business, you can never hold me bondage. So there you go. I became very transparent about things in my life, and people were wild because people only knew me in one context. But I'm hearing that I grew up a certain way, and I didn't grow up with a flush lifestyle, and looking at me now and saying, wow, what's going on there? It's like, man, listen, I recognize and realize, what I have. Listen, we all deal with a level of self-doubt. We all deal with it at some level or another. We deal with it. And so what we have to start doing, and I'm not one of the people who talk about the law of attraction and motivational speaking, but I do believe that the Bible says, use a scripture for the question, that David came back from a place and came home with his wives and his kids and his property was gone. It said that, and David men talked about stoning David. And the scripture said, and David encouraged himself in the Lord. I give that verse for this reason. I had to start learning how to speak to me. Start telling myself that, listen, you don't deserve to be at this table, but you're there. Now what you gonna do? Now what you gonna do? Yep. So what I started doing, John, is I would outread my colleagues. I read the Florida statutes. I would read everything I can read. So when I came to a meeting, when I started talking, you knew what I was talking about. I began to overcome the things that used to become a crutch of mine.
Ready. You were ready.
I was ready, man. And so acknowledging the doubts is cool, but once you acknowledge them, the greater question of the acknowledging the doubts is this: are you going to let them be an excuse or motivation? For me, it became motivation for me, because I understood that people felt like Darrick does not deserve to be in this room. Forget about race. So the fact of the matter is, why is he in the room? And so my motivation became not proving them wrong, but proving to myself that I deserve to be there. And the more I did that, I began to see things happen in my career at a greater level. Now, the worst thing you can do is to acknowledge your doubts, let them become your crutch, and then you spend the rest of your life saying, I wish I had her, or what if I, or blaming somebody else. I'm not going to lie to you, John. I've been through a lot in my life, right? Been through a lot of things, some great pain, some great losses. But here's also the reality of what I've been through. The reality I've been through also is, at some point I had to come to the realization that you got to face it, but you also can't fall up under it. Like you have to understand that once you face it, these things can now become motivation for you in a greater way.
Right.
I pastor people who are single parents. I pastor people, you know, who are on government assistance. I pastor people, you know, who have no relationship with their father or their mother, whatever. I pastor people like that. Pastor people who's the first generation college, first generation homeowner, first generation business owner who deal with struggle. And guess what happens? I'm now fortunate to be able to share with them what I've been through.
Absolutely.
And every time it encourages their heart, they realize, man, listen, you're not the first person to go through this. You're not. But guess what's going to happen? You're going to arise above all this. And brother, when I tell you, I would love to tell you sitting here that after 20 years in lobbying, 21 years in pastoring, and 21 years in ministry, 10 years of pastoring, I've arrived to a place where I've succeeded. I don't. I've learned how to do differently with the doubt, but then you factor on becoming a husband and a father. You think about that. When the doctor told us we were having a boy, my wife was excited. Man, I cried. I cried not because I wasn't happy about having a baby. I cried because I didn't feel like I could be a good father to a boy. I wanted a girl first because I felt like with a girl, mommy would overcompensate for daddy's failures. But we had a son first. And so my wife, once again, gave me some great advice. She said, Darrick, listen to me. She said, our son is not going to know that you don't know what you're doing. He's going to be so impressed by everything you do. My son to date, John, 14 years old, about to be a freshman in high school. My son still looks at me as a hero. And I get emotional thinking about him. And we spend a lot of time together. He loves his father. And I think about what I do matters around him. But I battle with those doubts of, man, if I do this wrong, the impact it'll have. If I fumble here, my son bears my name. Is my name worth carrying? Like those things, you still deal with those doubts and those inferiorities. But the blessing is I can look back on things I've been able to overcome and realize, brother, that there is now a blueprint that helps you face and overcome things. And for those who are dealing with doubt and it generates fear, fear has a singular purpose. It is to paralyze you enough to kill you from proceeding after purpose. That's what fear does, right? And so there'll be people in your life who want to remind you of the things that you have. You just can't do it because of this. You don't come from this. You don't come from this. That's their role, their responsibility. You want all that taken in. Let them say it. Let them say it. Please let them say it, because those things you want them to be able to say it, because what they don't realize is that you haven't forgotten where you come from. I recognize and realize where I come from. I recognize and realize I didn't come from a lot of money, that we didn't come from, we weren't living in mansions on hills, that we struggled. But that work ethic, that drive, that grind I was in my household, that grind was embedded in me, and now I'm able to put that same grind to work. And so if you're not careful with your doubts, they can become crutches that we use for life's excuses versus motivation for life successes. And you got to be careful about that. And I think people around you matter, because people around you can either propel you, right? And tell you, okay, I understand that you're struggling, but let's get past it. Let's move on. Or they can pull you in, and they can enable you.
Pull you back. That's right.
They can hold you back and say, listen, I understand, and it's okay. And no, it's not. Reading a book right now called You Can't Hurt Us. And it's an awesome book by David Coggins, I think is his last name. Navy SEAL. They need to be a
I think it's You Can't Hurt Me. I think it is. I saw that recently.
That's what it is. So I'm reading that book now, man.
Amazing story.
It's so powerful.
I'm gonna read that one.
It's so powerful, man.
I saw it recently. Yeah.
It's so powerful. He talks openly about growing up with an abusive father and things of that nature, man. Talking about the point I'm in the book now, talking about him going through the Navy SEAL training and how it came down to mental, telling himself, man, listen, we're gonna overcome this. We're gonna look at it, we're gonna face it, and we're gonna overcome it. And my thing I told anybody dealing with doubt is look at it as building blocks. Face the thing right in front of you. Once you overcome it, build upon that. right? You can't try to overtake everything at one point. You got to build upon these things. And this is important, but those around you matter, because you need people around you who are going to let you spend weeks and months and years with so many excuses. Because guess what happens? You'll look up one day, they've all moved on with their lives, and you're still there. I got friends from back home in my neighborhood in LA. I would go back home to visit, tell me that, man, you know what, D, man, I'm getting ready to do this. But it's been 20 years. It's been 20 years. But really why is because to them, it's a great idea. But to me, man, okay, listen, brother, at what point are you going to put fruition behind this? And I'll say people, that's man, right. that doubt, if allowed to linger, will keep you bound. But you have to acknowledge it. You have to face it. You have to overcome it. Even with tears in your eyes, you got to still be willing to press your way through this.
I'll make sure we put the image up. That's the,
can't hurt me. That's what it is.
You can't hurt me.
Awesome book,
amazing
man.
Story, man.
Awesome.
Hey, we're gonna cut it. We are going long, and I appreciate it. We might have three more pieces of this. we hadn't even got to the ministry. I want to talk about that. Okay. There's a special discussion that you and I've had in the past about fear and how that's been passed down generationally, right? Yep. Again, speaking about the mistrust and distrust and what that means. You've already touched on it already when we talk about fathers and grandfathers and things of that nature, and just who they were and what they knew, and how they knew to build men, right? So, right. And things that we have learned and are learning. I also want to talk about the next time we talk, and you've touched on it. I mean, even being in that room, sitting at the table and having that voice of doubt, right? How just skilled we have become at multitasking, right? In the sense of we can deal with excellence and work on just excelling and performing at the highest level while still battling doubt and fear and all kind of muck and gook in our life. We've learned how to do this, and it's not healthy, right? So I want to talk about that. And then we got a question down here, which we're going to hold for next time. We'll ask them to come back. But they're speaking about the fact that earlier you talked about having a mentor, and how do you go about selecting that right mentor? So let's make sure that we bring that up next time, mentorship. I gotta have you back. I want to be respectful of your time, respectful of everybody's time, but we're definitely going to have some part 2s and part 3s. And the next time I will not be in a shirt and tie. This is a one-time only. Next time I have on a t-shirt and he'll be in a 3-piece suit. Also shout out to the first lady. I see her in the group.
My mama's on too.
I know you couldn't be who you are without her. You said who else is on?
My mother's on. The Constance Faulkner name. That's my mama.
Shout out to Mama Faulkner. Amen. God bless. All that's wonderful. Another shout out real quick before we end. Andre Cannon, my man Dre. That's my roommate from how do I forget? Pattyfoot. That's my roommate from Pattyfoot.
Oh, wow.
Summer 1992. I could wake him up without even getting out of the bed.
Yes, I'm telling
you. We also decided what fire drills were important or not important, which I probably shouldn't be saying on air. But shout out to my man and everybody who went through Pattyfoot. God bless. So I love you, brother. We're gonna do this again soon. Okay. And thank you for sharing and being so transparent. It's important to me. It's important to so many in the community that can learn from this and grow from this. So we'll do it again soon, brother. All right. God bless. Y'all stay safe.
Bro. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Respect.